Hello and welcome to the last installment of the Lost Media Chronicles, the show that discusses lost movies, music, art, and morbid shit. It seems like the news is overwhelmed with celebrity deaths, or at least it was prior to the pandemic. Whenever a celebrity makes a particularly grisly end, though, via murder, suicide, overdose, or any situation where the body was left sitting around for a while, people start looking for pictures. Some celebrities' death photos are regularly available. Others, though, have never been leaked. This is the story of the lost death photos of comedy legend Lenny Bruce. Lenny Bruce is one of the most important comedians ever. His vulgar sense of humor and ability to get even some of the most sensitive ears roaring with laughter has remained influential on comedians such as George Carlin, Richard Pryor, and my personal favorites Bill Hicks and Bo Burnham. Bruce started his comedy routines with pretty run-of-the-mill, family-friendly fare, but his material got nowhere and he found himself extremely bored. His stand-up became progressively raunchier over time. It wasn't just the vulgarity of it, but his ability to make you think. His humor often got political, which only made people love and hate him more. Bruce's life and career were littered with legal problems. He frequently found himself banned from comedy clubs and ridiculed for the content of his shows. He was arrested on a few occasions for obscenity charges. This led him to become a huge critic of censorship in the media. He was also a frequent scam artist, scheming people out of their money in order to get his wife out of her job as a stripper. Then we have his frequent drug use, which involved heavy narcotics abuse. Bruce's later years were even more turbulent. His continued run-ins with the law resulted in deep depression that fueled his drug addiction even worse. He only appeared on television 6 times, with most of his appearances being lost media. His December 1965 performance at the Berkeley Community Theater was considered one of his best, but his calm, lucid appearance made many people worried, seeing as he was usually very archaic and animated. By 1966, due to his obscene content and drug use, he found himself blacklisted from most US comedy clubs. He started confining himself more to his hotel rooms, depending on drugs to keep himself going. His last show on June 25, 1966, where he opened for Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention for some reason at the Fillmore Auditorium in San Francisco, California, he was noted for looking whacked out on amphetamine. On August 3, 1966, Bruce was found dead in his Hollywood Hills home. He had gained a considerable amount of weight and let himself go completely. His beard had grown to an uncomfortable length, more so than anyone had ever seen, and he was nude, grasping an empty bottle with a burnt syringe. The cause of death was an acute accidental morphine poisoning. He was only 40 years old. Authorities described the scene as one of the most depressing they had ever had the misfortune to walk in on. Bruce looked withered and worn, like he'd lost all hope. The press jumped all over the scene, trying to sneak pictures. Luckily, none of them succeeded. Instead, they tried to get their hands on the police photos. Bruce's family was worried sick that the press would successfully buy the photos from the police and leak them to newspapers, much like what happened to Marilyn Monroe. However, someone had the foresight to beat them to the punch. Enter Phil Spector of all people, legendary record producer, friend of Lenny Bruce, and absolute batshit insane narcissist. Spector was famous for some of the best produced albums of his era, working with the Beatles, the Ramones, and perhaps most famously the Ronettes. Spector married the lead Ronette, Ronnie. He kept her confined to her room and was unreasonably jealous with every male she made contact with. He pulled a gun on her, kept her under heavy surveillance, and in one circumstance brought a coffin that he threatened to put her in if she ever left him. Other people he threatened with a gun include John Lennon, Leonard Cohen, and the Ramones. When Spector once fired a gun over John Lennon's head, Lennon replied by saying, "Phil, if you're going to kill me, but don't fuck with my ears, I need them." He's currently serving a prison sentence for killing actress Lana Clarkston, and he'll likely die there. I think I made my point how much of an asshole this man is. I bring it up because it's relevant for context to this part of the story for Bruce's death photos. In Ronnie Ronette's biography, Be My Baby, she talked about Phil's relationship with Bruce. Let's just say it was more than just a friendship for Phil. It was a downright obsession. He constantly played Bruce's live performances at full blast, even at late hours of the night. He had a massive wall-to-wall portrait of Bruce facing them in the bedroom. She talked about how she had trouble orgasming during sex because of Bruce's bearded, weathered face staring her down. Shortly after Bruce died, Phil suddenly locked himself away for days in his office. She could only hear sobbing through the door, which itself is understandable seeing how Phil and Bruce were allegedly close friends. I say allegedly because we really don't know for sure, and Phil is a notorious liar. However, at the time, Ronnie didn't know why Phil had disappeared. One day, Phil finally emerged and offered to make Ronnie a grilled cheese sandwich, her favorite treat. Keep that sandwich in mind, it's important for later. He disappeared to make it, and she got curious when she found Phil's door to his office open. This never happened, and her curiosity got the better of her. She went inside and fumbled through the drawers. When she opened one of them, she stopped, utterly shocked. There were the pictures of Lenny, naked, bloated, withered, and dead. Her morbid state caused her to not being able to take her eyes off. Then, after a few moments, she suddenly found a triangle slice of bread fly by her face. Phil had caught her, and he was absolutely furious. He yelled at her for, quote, violating his privacy, and smashed the plate on the floor. She later discovered that Phil had purchased the photos from authorities for what he claimed was to avoid them getting into the wrong hands. This is highly doubtful, however, because of Phil's unhealthy obsession with the man. Ronnie thinks he spent days trapped in his office, staring at the pictures, sobbing. The current location of the photos remain a mystery. After Spector was imprisoned for the murder, it's speculated that the photos possibly changed hands. It's unknown if the photos ended up back in the possession of authorities, a close friend or family member of Spector's, or if they're still in the Spector house. I personally think that the pictures should be found. However, not for the reasons that you might be thinking. Most people want morbid death photos and footage found because they want to see it for themselves. I personally want them found so that way they can be returned back to the family of the person who died. I've had a bit of a change of heart recently with a lot of the morbid stuff, as I see it as highly disrespectful to seek that stuff out for your own selfish reasons. Bruce's death was only meant to be seen by authorities and nobody else. Yes, Spector kept them out of the hands of the press, but Spector himself was likely not as close to Bruce as he claims. He should have never had the photos to begin with, or at the very least, if he really meant well, he should have given the photos to Bruce's family. These photos remain some of the many lost celebrity death photos. What makes Bruce's more sought after, however, is both the description authorities gave of his body and the insane Phil Spector story behind it. Bruce was an absolute legend, even if his material seems tame by today's standards. That about does it, not just for this episode, but for the series in general. I know a lot of people are upset that I'm ending the Chronicles, but I feel like this chapter in my life is over. I'm long removed from the wiki, and I honestly don't feel like I'm putting my heart and soul into the series. I feel like there's other YouTubers that do it better than I do. I understand completely if you want to unsubscribe. When I started this series, I did it with the intention of trying to draw attention to my other shows, but as you can see, that didn't really work. It ended up becoming my most popular series, and I always kind of felt spiteful for it. I don't feel like it's healthy for me to continue a series like this with this attitude, and I feel like my audience deserves better content from better creators. I know a lot of you like my perspective and input, but but I shouldn't be making these videos at the cost of my own mental health. And don't worry, I'm not pulling a Doug Walker ending my most popular series, expecting my other series to be even more popular. I'm just making these videos for the sake of my own enjoyment at this point, and I kind of don't really care if I ever become famous or successful. I really want to thank you guys for sticking around as long as you have. I hope you can find it in you to forgive me for canceling this series, and hopefully you'll give my other shows a chance. I did have fun for the most part, but I feel like it's time for me to move on. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see my other content. Thank you very much.